we are going to speak to one of Mr. Modi's top ministers who holds at least 4 economic portfolios, including Commerce Ministry, and has been somebody who has also functioned as a finance minister a few years ago. Piyush Goyal needs no introduction. Thank you very much for speaking to Times Now. Mr. Goyal, the need of the hour is to continue India's sparkling performance on the global stage and of course on the domestic stage, and the headline, the breakaway headline that has really got everyone buzzing is the emphasis on capital expenditure. That's really what the doctor had asked for, and you have delivered on that. For a moment we thought that the markets would cheer it, but then for some reasons the market sort of deflated. Nonetheless, I want to ask you, this thrust on capex at a time when it is necessary also to, I suppose, roll back inflation, tame it, and also of course stay within the parameters of fiscal deficit numbers, how will this be achieved, and what's the real aim of this record boost in capex?
Rahul, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has chosen a very prudent path to preparing the nation for the coming 25 years. Over the last few years, after having inherited a very, very bad economic situation, we spent a lot of our time in building up the strong economic fundamentals, in strengthening our banking system, making business easier in India to do, strengthening systems for high levels of probity and integrity. And we were all set to fly when COVID hit the world. Clearly we all recognize that we lost some time there, and soon after that we also are grappling with an international depression and high inflation worldwide thanks to the conflict in Ukraine. Despite all of this, the world today recognizes India as a bright star and a country which will actually propel global growth, because they recognize that India today has a strong and decisive, honest leadership, a leadership that is committed to the good of India and its people, but also is a responsible global citizen. Look at the thrust on sustainability or our own contribution to climate change. They also recognize that India has gone beyond just the basic amenities of life, and thanks largely to the steps taken in the last few years, where we've ensured everybody gets a good quality house, shelter, where nobody ever has to suffer and sleep at night hungry, where the basic needs of every citizen of the country are well taken care of, so that his desires and his aspirations for the better things of life will come to the fore. And that demand push that this gives, that urge and desire to contribute to a better future for the nation that we get because of this, is what is propelling the country to higher growth levels. We are the fastest growing economy amongst the large economies, and will continue to be so for many, many years to come. Basically, Prime Minister Modi, through his focus on capex, and it's not today, it has grown from 3.5 lakhs to 5.5 to 7.5, and now 10 lakh in a short span of 4 years. Apart from that, if you look at the effective capital expenditure, it's over 13.5 lakh crores. Even a scheme like Manrega today is not digging a hole and filling it up. It creates some asset in the local area. The Amrit Sarovars in 75 in each district will help create reservoirs of water. The thrust on tourism will give more employment than any other program. The Vishwakarma Yojana will prepare our youth, particularly those who use their own capabilities and skill, handlooms, handicrafts, carpenters, plumbers, all sorts of people will be trained and retrained to increase their incomes. So in a way, it's a very foundational budget which is preparing. It's the first year in the Amrit Kal, as Madam said. And Honorable Finance Minister has truly presented a foundational budget preparing us for 25 glorious years ahead.
So the thrust is not 2024 but 2047. Okay, let me ask you. Obviously the government has decided to do the heavy lifting by investing in capex, and that is very good. Obviously the idea is to spark demand. But why is the private sector capex down? Why is the private sector, sir, some of the big companies that you also come across as Commerce Minister, why aren't they putting the weight behind this obviously optimistic scenario that the government is banking on? Why don't they think that there is demand in the economy?
Yes. Well, I would beg to differ with you on that, Rahul, with due respect. The reality is that we had a lot of surplus capacities which were remaining unutilized for many years because of the sluggishness of the Indian economy. Over the last few years, that demand that we have been able to create has met that capacities, and now capacities are kind of fully utilized or increasingly utilized. That is necessary before we can look at massive investments coming from the private sector. And my own experience is, whichever sector I talk to, recently I was discussing civil aviation. Already we have over 1,000 planes which are either already ordered or soon to be ordered for meeting the needs of growing civil aviation in the country. I've been talking to companies around the world. Look at Apple. Apple is the first, but there are many, many more Apples behind them who are looking at massively shifting their supply chains to India. Apple today, which produces about 5% of their global production in India, has ambitious plans to go up to 25% in the next 3 years. And like that, wherever I'm going, I'm finding a lot of interest in India, but the interest could be of different types. Everything need not be massive capex based investments. R&D is becoming very attractive in India. Our managerial skills, our talent, huge talent that our young engineers and boys and girls have, that is attracting innovation into the country. Our startup ecosystem is providing smarter ways to do the same thing at less capital investment. So I think things have evolved and are changing. So dynamics of private sector spending and investment is now hugely different from what it was maybe 2 or 3 decades ago.
Okay, the other big thrust was to, this time, obviously with the view to spurring demand, was to give more to the middle class, put more in the pocket of the middle class, a tax bonanza. We know that the announcement was made across 7 different aspects, but is that really the case? It seems more like an attempt to make the new tax regime more attractive, the real default regime. That's what a lot of people are saying. I want your view on this.
Sure, Rahul. First of all, the middle class is extremely important for us, and the steps we have taken over the last 9 years have to be seen in context. After all, when we make it easier to meet the day-to-day needs of a person and a family, that is equally a benefit to the middle class. Everything is not only about a tax regime, and I'll come to that also. When we increase the number of students who get an opportunity to do medical education, to become engineers, or to get trained in soft skills, to get vocational training, to study abroad, all of these things also help our middle class. Over the years, different tax exemptions have kept on growing. The limits have kept on growing, the tax exemptions have kept on growing. So it's a long-term play that you will have to consider. Even in this budget, some people are trying to calculate the old tax regime and the new tax regime and say there's no benefit at all in the old tax regime. I beg to differ with them. They're taking a scenario where they assume that every taxpayer will enjoy the fruits of every exemption, which is rarely the case. There may not be 1 or 2% people who can enjoy every one of those exemptions. that are offered in the old tax regime. And now standard deduction has also been extended further. So my own sense is that there is not an apple-to-apple comparison. Everybody stands to gain from the changes that have been made, and clearly middle class particularly likes to have things simpler. They want ease of doing business, which we have done over the last 9 years. They want ease of living, which has been our focus area, and therefore the process and procedure of tax paying and the tax regime is equally important for them. Today they don't have to rush to an income tax office to get their refund. It comes into their account automatically. They don't have to worry about tax assessments. There's very little assessment. Most of it is artificial intelligence based, and randomly people are selected. But those assessments are also faceless, so the tax officer doesn't know who is the taxpayer is. And finally, if I may conclude, taxpayers are not against paying taxes. When you earn good amount of money, you don't mind contributing to nation building in small measure. But as Honorable Prime Minister has said on more than one occasion, as Honorable Finance Minister also reiterated today, every single rupee of tax that is collected by the Modi government over the last 9 years has gone in for serving the people of India, for preparing the nation for better times in the future. They have gone in for the good of the country, for the good of the poor, for the good of 140 crore Indians.
Okay, let me persist and play devil's advocate. The reason I asked you about whether this was lip service to the cause is because we know that under the new tax regime, there are very few converts. We don't even have the numbers. I don't know why the government hasn't released the numbers. Is it because you do realize that perhaps people want the exemptions of the old tax regime and do not want to be without a safety net? One. Two, if you were so well disposed towards the middle class, why no relief in indirect taxes? Then how are we to believe you when you say that middle classes have been given relief?
Rahul, first of all, the indirect tax regime is no more in our hands. The indirect tax regime is now handled by the GST Council, and they are the ones who take the decisions, where the vast majority is held by the states. The center has a smaller role than all the states put together. So that's a collective decision that is taken under the wisdom of the GST Council. As regards the few areas which are still in our control, we have been able to, despite petrol and diesel prices reaching the roof, the center kept giving relief to the common man. The prices have been stable. The opposition ruled states even today have not reduced the VAT. It is only the BJP NDA states and the center which has continuously given relief to the middle class. Similarly, even in our custom duties, as you will see now, we have supported and tried to encourage domestic industry, which will mean jobs and new opportunities for our entrepreneurs. At the same time, we've tried to make it more affordable to own a television, for example, more attractive to have an electric vehicle. So we are continuously making every single effort we can to promote domestic industry, to improve the quality of goods and services in India, to make it attractive for the world market and therefore expand our international engagement. And lastly, every step of the way, we are working to empower 140 crore Indians. We are working to bring more transparency and honesty into the system. And that is a wholesome thinking, a holistic thinking, which today is liked by the common man, by the people of India, which is why election after election we receive their support and their blessings.
No, that's fine. I agree with you, but you haven't answered my question about the lip service aspect of this tax cut, because only a very few people will avail of this or even benefit from this. So how is it such a big sweeping bonanza?
Well, I think as more and more people will assess in the context of today's announcements and the lower tax rates, and particularly the complete exemption up to 7 lakhs, my own sense is, and then even after 7 lakhs up to 9 lakhs, you have a very small 5% tax rate, and it goes at different levels at very small, or rather 3 lakh to 6 lakh at 5%, 6 to 9 lakhs at 10%. The overall tax burden has been kept so reasonable that my sense is more and more people will now find virtue in the new tax regime.
Even though the opposition says that the new tax regime will rob them of a security net. That's what Chidambaram has said in his comments.
No, Rahul, I think Mr. Chidambaram is misguiding the people. In our view, it is the choice of each individual what he wants to do, which particular saving instrument he would like to put his money in. I don't see any reason why after 7 decades of independence, 75 years of independence, we still need to have that old thinking where we need to guide our people towards an insurance policy. I think insurance companies need to make their policies so attractive that more and more people are attracted to them. I think our banks need to make their offerings so attractive that people are attracted to them. I think stock markets will have to now vie for or compete on an equal footing with everybody. Housing will have to make their prices so attractive that people are attracted towards a particular project or scheme. I don't think it's the government's job to be forcing or encouraging people in one direction vis-a-vis the other. Our people are smart. Our middle class knows what is good for them, and they will make intelligent decisions. That is the belief that we all have.
Well, I suppose if they trust Mr. Modi on this, then they will adopt the new tax regime, and that we can only know if you release the numbers. Why we haven't seen those numbers is a mystery, and I don't know if you will want to clarify on that. But I also want to, apart from this,
Rahul,
yes, okay. Yeah.
Rahul, may I, Rahul, for just a minute?
Of course.
Just before I came into my office from Parliament, I asked one of my colleagues in the office, one of the young boys who's working here, I said, how do you look at both these schemes? He said, sir, all of us youngsters, we prefer the new tax regime, the people who are coming into work now. Many of the old people, older employees, since they have already locked into an insurance policy, for example, or they are locked into a bank deposit, or they have locked into a particular saving instrument, which under the earlier regime was getting certain benefits, they have no choice but to stay in that.
Okay.
So I think it was a very intelligent answer from a young boy in my office.
Okay. Well,
and
I wonder if he was looking.
It will take some time.
Okay. Well, I'll go with that. Obviously, he might have also been wanting to please you, maybe get a promotion out of you, but that's okay. Look, I understand where you're coming from on this. I just want to ask you this because the opposition says.
By the way, sorry, none of us can give a promotion to them that
I'm being
goes by
facetious.
the government
Allow me.
system.
No, allow me.
I cannot promote anybody.
No, I'm just being facetious. You know that. But I just want to come back to what you were saying, because the opposition says that the cuts in allocations for farmer-friendly schemes shows that your government is callous. They have said that the budget didn't even mention the word unemployment, poverty, inequality or equity. In fact, they say that they only mentioned the word poor twice. The finance minister did. So how do you respond to this? Because many people are looking at this and wondering about your commitment to farmer welfare.
Well, first of all, there's no cut in farmer welfare at all. Even their credit schemes and all have got higher allocation. As regards the small reduction in the Kisan, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana, I think that's something that's the states give us the data, and the state, I'll come to that, and the states tell us how many farmers fall within the eligibility. In fact, if more people are getting out of that, that means they are becoming more and more well-to-do. That means either their farm holdings are going up, or they may have got a job somewhere because of which they don't come under the scheme. Or, Rahul, kindly note, some of the states also had created, because earlier when the scheme started, the verification process was completely manual and in the hands of the states. At the lower levels, they may have probably got some people who are not really beneficiaries, but may have enjoyed the fruits of that. So I think it's a process that's state driven, and states send us the list based on which the requirement of funds is assessed. Similarly, on Manrega, it's a demand-driven scheme. You will see last year also the amount allocated was less, but as the demand came in the revised estimates, it has been increased. Finance Minister has said on more than one occasion that never will there be a shortage for Manrega funds, as and when the demand comes in from the state, should more funds be required, they'll be provided in supplementary budgets, which are periodically coming out, monsoon session or winter session.
Okay.
Now even in the budget session, in the second half, we'll have a supplementary demand. So there'll be no shortage of funds, particularly for the farmers or the poor. And as regards the number of times, I think the opposition may be counting that. We believe it's a sign of growing prosperity, and it's a sign of the self-confidence of India that we are gradually emerging out of the shadows of the past and the legacy which was left behind by the Congress. For them and other opposition parties, Garibi Hatao and all of that were mere slogans. We believe in action, and therefore for Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharamanji has focused her entire speech on action and action and action.
Okay, last question to you, Mr. Goyal. You've lowered the disinvestment, divestment target. Now, two things on the back of this. Is it because there is election expediency at work, or you've just given up on meeting these targets? What's going on here?
Not at all. These are again driven by a process. For example, you are well aware that there was a steel plant which was slated for disinvestment, but because of the local state government and the local sentiment, that has not yet happened. So I think Honorable Finance Minister has only been more prudent. Earlier, when the targets were much higher and we were not able to meet that, there was criticism that you are overestimating it. I think Honorable Finance Minister has, with due respect to all those who used to complain about high targets, kept a very reasonable and modest target. We'll certainly try to exceed that. We are very clear that non-strategic sectors where government has no business to be in business should not remain in government, and we should use our scarce resources for the larger prosperity of the people of India, for giving more and more thrust to projects and programs which strengthen India in the long run to become truly a global superpower.
Well, we've run out of time. Mr. Goyal, thank you very much for speaking to me on Times Now and setting the record straight on those questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.